to God in a very secularized world. I will be continuing with this article that I wrote, Many Priests in Hell, Human Respect. You know, think about it. What would you think of a doctor who cared nothing about disease and does not want to talk about disease and sends patients with a grave disease home, telling the patient not to worry because the doctor was afraid of upsetting the patient? He would be considered a quack, an incompetent, culpable of gross professional negligence. He could be sued for malpractice. But if priests do not speak about the only thing that can kill the soul, mortal sin, because the people, spiritual patients, do not want to hear these things, what would you think of such a priest? If the doctor operates in this way, the person could easily lose his life. But if the doctor of souls, the priest, does this, the person could lose his immortal soul, which lasts for all eternity. As Jesus said, "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his life?" Pope John Paul II, among many other occasions, spoke firmly to the U.S. bishops, and thus to all bishops, against this pick-and-choose smorgasbord-type Catholicism in Los Angeles in September 1987, in his visit. At that visit, he said, "It is sometimes reported that a large number of Catholics today do not adhere to the teaching of the Church on a number of questions, notably sexual and conjugal morality, divorce and remarriage. Some are reported as not accepting the Church's clear position on abortion. It has also been noted that there is a tendency on the part of some Catholics to be selective in their adherence to the Church's moral teachings. It is sometimes claimed that dissent from the magisterium is totally compatible with being a good Catholic and poses no obstacle to the reception of the sacraments." He continues, he said, "This is a grave error that challenges the teaching office of the bishops of the United States and elsewhere. I wish to encourage you in the love of Christ to address this situation courageously in your pastoral ministry, relying on the power of God's truth to attract assent and on the grace of the Holy Spirit, which is given both to those who proclaim the message and to those to whom it is addressed." It is interesting that Pope John Paul II did not say to the bishops that they must obey me as Pope, but dissent from the magisterium, because the truth of God doesn't change. The truth of the Catholic Church. Lumen Gentium 25 teaches clearly that the documents of an ecumenical council are infallible. Catechism number 891. The Catechism of the Catholic Church in paragraphs 888 to 892 tell us that the doctrines of the Church are essential to arrive to sanctity. And quoting, "When the Church, through its supreme magisterium, proposes a doctrine for belief as being divinely revealed, and as the teaching of Christ, the definitions must be adhered to with obedience of faith. This infallibility extends as far as the deposit of divine revelation itself. But to the ordinary teaching of the Church, the faithful are to adhere to it with religious assent, which, though distinct from assent of faith, is nonetheless an extension of it. Thus, the documents in an ecumenical council express in human language the absolute truths which cannot be changed, even by a future pope for apparently good motives to make the non-Catholics feel more at ease, or for non-practicing Catholics. This would be false ecumenism, false mercy, false love, which offers a superficial and easy solution without the cross of Christ. But afterwards, there is slavery and destruction. The Catholic Church has always taught Conscience must be informed and moral judgment enlightened. A well-informed conscience is upright and truthful. It formulates its judgments according to reason, in conformity with the true good willed by the wisdom of the Creator. The education of conscience is indispensable for human beings who are subjected to negative influences and tempted by sin to prefer their own judgment and to reject authoritative teachings. This is Catechism, paragraph 1783. The absolute truth does exist. Conscience can remain in ignorance or make erroneous judgments. Such ignorance and errors are not always free of guilt. That you can read in the Catechism. No one is deemed to be ignorant of the principles of the moral law which are written in the conscience of every man. Paragraph 1860. After the Vatican Council and the post-council was well underway, Pope John Paul II wrote, contesting certain currents of modern thought. The individual conscience is accorded the status of a supreme tribunal of moral judgment, which hands down categorical and infallible decisions about good and evil, so much so that some have come to adopt a radical subjectivistic conception of moral judgment. This you can read in his encyclical Veritatis Splendor, number 32. What happens to the few priests and bishops today who do their fundamental work to identify and cure as spiritual doctors the gravest sicknesses of the soul, mortal sins? The priests today who preach the whole gospel, not just the easy parts, and not half-truths, which are worse than lies, and all the teachers of the magistrate of the church, are labeled rigid and old-fashioned rigid. Pope Francis often does exactly this, to criticize good priests as being rigid because they remain faithful to the truth of God that does not change. This is a fundamental strategy to put aside the good priests and to put up the priests who change with the world. They are labeled rigid, old-fashioned, insensitive, lacking in compassion, decisive, judgmental, and moralist, while at the same time the ones who maintain a culpable silence, the ones who tell their people what they think they want to hear, are seen as understanding, sympathetic, pastorally sensitive, and merciful. Jesus said, "Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so their fathers did to the false prophets." Luke 6. And Jesus continues, "For they love the praise of men more than the praise of God." John 12. How can you believe who receive glory from one another and do not seek the glory that comes from God, from only God? John 5. But this way of doing is not true mercy. This is false love, misguided compassion, false mercy, false ecumenism that does not lead to paradise for all eternity. You can read my article about this, about Pope Francis. The article is called "Rigid with Christ, the Immutable Truth." Jesus says also, he says, "So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will deny before my Father who is in heaven." Matthew 10. A few times I said in various parishes in the past, after complaints about my homilies, I said, "I did not write the 10 Commandments. Why do you want to kill me?" Sometimes it's that strong. The great majority of priests today do not explain the gospel and the 10 Commandments according to God, explained well in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that John Paul II left us as a great gift. But they explain it according to what the people want to hear, according to the world, according to the television, according to a Christianity without the cross. Here, if you want to read the reason why the Bishop of Perugia took away my parish at Lisciano Niconi on October 13th, 2015, without even speaking to me beforehand. You can read my articles, several articles. One is a letter to my bishop, another article, the hidden broad road to perdition, and another article, the neo-catechumenal mass. I finish this video clip here. May God bless you and Mary guide you.